Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of AM Minnesota. We've got a delightful show, not that we don't every day, but I've really been looking forward to visiting with Gary Hoganson, and we've got Perry Mason in Studio 2 today talking about the Cannon Valley Elder Collegium. Yeah, some interesting courses coming up in the spring. Thanks, Gary, for coming by today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us, Gordy.
Yeah. Are you on the board, too?
Yes, the Faribault board.
There's two different boards.
Yes, one up in Faribault, or one in Faribault that organizes classes here, and then one up in Northfield that organizes the classes.
Oh, okay. And Perry obviously is from Northfield.
Yes, I am.
And you've been on the board for a little over a year, you were saying?
Just a little less than a year now.
Oh, a little less?
Yes.
Than a year. Okay. Well, are you enjoying it?
Very much so.
You get paid?
Not enough, of course, but yes, I get paid a bit.
Okay. So it's not totally
volunteer. Yes, a good portion of his volunteer work. Yes, yeah. Yes.
So Jerry get paid for teaching that course last week?
No, he didn't, but it was much appreciated having him come and be a presenter. The whole idea behind the Elder Collegium classes, Gordy, is to provide liberal arts classes or interesting classes to our seniors, and we feel that we're always lifelong learners, and we can always learn more. And it's pretty interesting to go back and visit some of those subject areas that maybe you're a little rusty on from high school or college, and kind of brush up on some of our skills and learn new information.
Well, and this can be a medical benefit too. You know, I think there is some research that shows if you keep your mind active, it helps stave off Alzheimer's, right?
Yes. And even if it doesn't stave it off, it helps you deal with it better.
Well, there you go. A questing mind never retires. That's what it says at the top. Is that a famous quote from somebody, or?
I don't know, but it's certainly apt for what is motivating all of the hundreds of people who take courses and who offer courses in the Elder Collegium.
And this is your 21st year.
This is 21st year. It was founded in 1997. By two retiring St. Olaf College professors. And the aim was, as Gary said, to offer college-level courses for people who are beyond, and then there's a little looseness about what you have to be beyond, 55 or 50 to take the courses. And I think if a 48-year-old showed up, he or she wouldn't be turned away, of course.
Of course not.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be retired to attend this?
No. Oh, gosh, no. And in fact, 2 or 3 of our teachers over a given year might still be employed in some capacity or other. But most of us who've done the teaching are retired.
So did you originally start as Northfield only, or have you always been Faribault and Northfield?
It was started originally as the Cannon Valley Elder Collegium, but it was run for many years as if it were the Northfield Elder Collegium. And about 3 years ago, one of the persons on the board, the chair of the board at the time, said, the Cannon Valley extends well beyond the city limits of Northfield, people, please. And the nearest city to us, to Northfield, geographically, and I think in terms of connections, is Faribault. So we're down here now. And we're aiming to have every term, we have 3 terms a year, 8-week terms. We're aiming to have 12 courses each term in Northfield and 3 in Faribault, and those numbers can be fluid. If we get enough teachers to teach here in Faribault, enough students here, that number will grow.
Well, there's some classes in Northfield I'd be interested in. I'm sure a lot of Faribault people would, and I'm sure there's classes in Faribault that Northfield people would be interested in.
Indeed.
And South Metro people, I would think, would be coming to some of your classes.
We have commuters from the Twin Cities.
I would hope so. There's some really interesting classes there, folks. We're going to run them down in a moment, but right now we're going to get that opening market report, a service of your KDHL Agri-Boosters, including Bart Jackson Insurance Agency, downtown Faribault. Bart's happy to customize the right insurance coverage for you, specializing in farms and business.
Chevy Equinox LT for just $229 a month, or save up to $12,000 off MSRP on a new 2018 Silverado LT Crew Cab. Yes, a lot to love. Chevy, find new roads. Harry Brown's Family Automotive in Faribault. Online at harrybrownsgm.com.
Tomorrow on our AM Minnesota show, George Wickstrom, Marcia Morrisbeck will be here. We're going to talk about reasons and strategies for the Virtues Project going on here in Faribault. Monday, John Dvorak stops by from the Rice County Fair. I know it's hard to believe, but the fair will be here before you know it. They got some big plans. And this, of course, being KDHL Radio's 70th year of broadcasting. We'll be doing some pretty exciting things at the fair, too, I do believe. We'll be talking about that on Monday's AM Minnesota show. In studio today, Perry Mason and Gary Hoganson are members of the board of the Cannon Valley Elder Collegium. Classes taught in Northfield and in Faribault. Although I see people coming probably from Lonsdale and Cannon Falls and all over, right, Perry?
And Burnsville even.
Oh, I'm sure. The South
Yes.
Metro, Farmington,
Yes.
Lakeville.
Cannon Falls, yes.
Absolutely.
Owatonna also, to the south.
Sure. Makes
So-
perfect sense.
Exactly.
I see there is a limit. Most of these are really small classes.
Yes. Classes generally run 8 weeks, and the classes meet once a week for a 2-hour session. Some classes are 4 weeks, and so others can't decide whether to go 4 or 8, so they have 6-week classes. I think we should say that the tuition fee for a full term, an 8-week class, is $50, and then there may be text required, of course, a little more than that, up to $25. And a 4-week course is $30. Generally, classes have a limit. We started with a limit of 15, but so many classes were filled up, we said, okay, 18. And some people say, well, okay, 20.
Yeah.
And then we have some people whose classes are so popular that we offer 2 sections. For example, right now this winter we have a course going with two teachers on the Hollywood musical. And they had 2 sections, each limited to 20, so they could handle 40 students. They had 82 people apply. They've already agreed to offer the course, again with 2 sections, next year. We have several other courses that we simply have to double up. Very popular teachers and very appealing subjects.
Now I see you've got 36 is the highest I see here
Yes,
for a class. Great Decisions 2018.
yes. That is being offered by Robert Flatten, who is a retired State Department official. He was ambassador to Rwanda. This is part of a national program by the Foreign Policy Association. Each year they set a series of 6 to 10 topics for groups of intelligent citizens to discuss and make recommendations to, and those recommendations are all forwarded to the Foreign Policy Association. Ambassador Flatten has done this course now, I'm not even quite sure, I think it's at least 10 years. He and his wife, Sharon Flatten, will be offering it, and the topics are remarkably interesting, and those will be forwarded up to St. Paul, I assume, and from St. Paul to Washington, D.C. So this is a course in which you learn something, but you might also have a beneficial effect even on U.S. foreign policy.
Does the University of Minnesota have an Elder Collegium?
They have a similar program. Most of their courses are shorter courses. Some of them are even a single session, and most of those are offered by active professors at the U. As I said earlier, we have a few active professors, but for the most part, our faculty are chosen from retirees, from not just academia, but from various other professions.
Which probably works well, Gary, because they can relate better to their students, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, you get a 30-year-old teaching the class. I'm not saying they can't relate, but I'm just saying it's probably easier.
The first time I taught in the Elder Collegium, I was 68 years old, and I was by 2 years the youngest person in the room. Next to me sat a 92-year-old.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's never too late to learn more
Exactly.
information.
Absolutely not. What I love about this most, Perry, there's no grading.
What I love most about it, there's no papers to grade.
No testing.
No tests to grade.
No tests, none of that.
Yes.
You're paying for the class, but reasonable price, as you just mentioned those.
Yes, yes.
I
I think
think
it's
they're reasonable.
it's quite a bargain.
Absolutely. So, talk about a couple of my favorite course on here, and I was talking to Gary earlier, is the real CSI story. Sheriff Troy Dunn and Faribault Police Chief Andy Bolin are going to teach that the fourth Thursdays in April, 1 until 3 in the afternoon. There's a limit of 20 people. That's going to fill up really fast.
Well, we certainly hope so. I think it's a very fascinating program we've got lined up here. Very pleased to have both of them on board to help us organize these classes and put them together. I think the starting point for that was, for me, we see all these CSI programs on TV, and let's separate some of that fact from fiction. Can we separate that a little bit? Because they solve the crime so quickly on TV, and in reality, are some of these tests legitimate or fictional? What's going on? And so they will help us with that. We're going to talk about crime lab investigations. We're going to discuss a little bit about the morgue and the county coroner and his duties within this. And then we're going to, our last session of the 4 weeks is going to be discussing the drug task force. Of course, the opioid addiction problem is very serious, not only in Rice County but throughout the nation. And they're also going to give us a little time discussing the scams for seniors and trying to help us prevent some of what's going on as seniors become more vulnerable to these crimes today.
That'll be very interesting to learn. Again, that's starting on April the 5th, right?
Yes.
Yep, April the 5th through April the 26th, 1 until 3 in the afternoon. They meet at the Faribault Police Station.
Mm-hmm. Gordy, we must mention here that all of these classes can be examined a little bit more further and in depth at our website, which is cvec.org. And you can also register from that website for these classes. And also at the Northfield Senior Center and the Faribault Senior Center have applications.
Okay, I do have a link to your website on our website.
Terrific.
Wonderful.
So
Thank you for doing that.
Check on that, cvec.org.
Yes.
cvec.org. We are all of the same vintage before internet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
It's been quite a blessing, hasn't it?
Indeed, yes. I wouldn't know how to communicate with my students in the Elder Collegium without the internet. I have one good friend who has been a student of mine and who is teaching every year at least once, who doesn't do email. We have fun.
He just says, I don't want anything to do with it.
We resort to an earlier form of technology called the U.S. Mail Service.
Well, there you go. Which, isn't being utilized as much as it once was. So what have you taught?
Well, I've taught a series of philosophy courses. The first one I taught was Socrates Confronts the Gods.
Wow.
Socrates, as well known, was convicted of impiety, of introducing new gods to the city, and he was condemned to death. And so we looked at a variety of writings about Socrates to see what that really amounted to, and to see if whether it wasn't just Socrates but all of philosophy that was on trial there.
Sure.
And I've taught a course on central ideas of Plato's philosophy, a course on Aristotle's ethics, and then most recently some philosophical questions about mental illness and psychiatry. And I don't know what's coming next. We'll see.
Well, that sounds very interesting too, doesn't it, Gary?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Now, Gary's teaching a course in the winter. Listen to this, folks. It's kind of philosophical. What is art?
Oh, the spring course. Yes. What is art? It should be very fun. I've got 4 sessions lined up. We're going to try to separate, what is art, considered good art, bad art. There are some guidelines that we can use to determine what is good art and what's bad art. I'm also going to spend some time talking about artists and some of the interesting stories behind the artists. Obviously, when you're talking about art and art history, it's such a broad, wide area. I'm not going to be able to go into depth with that, but I think we'll have a very good understanding of the different styles of arts and a little bit more insight into the artists.
So we're talking periods of art too?
Yes, we will. Yeah, and how art has evolved from recording of history way back in the caveman all the way up to our current and present time. And art has been very important to all of us in terms of recording our history, making impacts on our political statements, and what has motivated those artists to create the art that they do.
Now we think that art came before language, right?
Yes, pictures probably
I don't know that
yes.
anybody around knows whether or not the cavemen were able to communicate or not. I mean,
that's a philosophical question.
There we
They
go.
they made some very interesting marks on cave walls.
Yes,
though.
they did.
Yes. Gordy, let's name some of these classes that are going to be presented here.
Those are a couple of my
Perry,
favorites.
why don't you go through the Northfield classes that will be offered?
Yeah, we have 10 classes this spring in Northfield, and I'll just run down from beginning to end.
Sure.
Dana Strand, a retired professor of French at Carleton, will be offering her first course, The Seventh Art. France Goes to the Movies, and she'll be looking at the role of French movies in the history of the cinema in the 20th century. Mike Harper, who's a retired lawyer, will be teaching a course entitled Thinking About Vietnam 2018. And by Vietnam, thinking about Vietnam, he means about the war. Mike was a Marine fighter pilot in that war and has taught a course on the Vietnam War previously. The recent television program about the war, Ken Burns' series, rekindled Mike's interest and the interest of people in talking about the war. It's going to be a very interesting, thoughtful, thought-provoking course. Gary Gisselman, who is best known as a director of musical plays in the Twin Cities, is retired from the St. Olaf faculty, will be doing the American Musical Theater, and we expect this one to be mobbed. He's be looking primarily at Sondheim and Rodgers and Hammerstein. Richard Crowder, retired professor of religion at Carleton, will be offering a course listening to Reinhold Niebuhr again in the Trump era. Richard taught a course on Reinhold Niebuhr several years ago. It was very, very well received. And as we look at the political doings in Washington and across the country, he believes that we all need to pay attention to what this pivotal 20th century theologian had to say about politics. Bill Werlin, retired history professor from Carleton, will have a course on Russian literature in the 20th century and after. This one we expect to be very popular, so much so that we're offering 2 sections of it. His point is that in the 20th century and now we're almost 20% through the 21st century, the poor Russian people have endured one catastrophe after another. 2 world wars. They were invaded twice in the 20th century. Several million Russians died in the Second World War. They've had various systems collapse on them, and one should expect their artistic literature to reveal some interesting things about them. And so the course will look primarily at short stories and poetry. Short stories. The stories of Frank O'Connor will be offered by Jim McDonnell, retired professor of English from Carleton. Frank O'Connor is not so well known to most of us in the United States. He's an Irish writer and literary critic who spent much of his career teaching in the United States before returning to his home country. And this will be a course in his short stories. We've already mentioned the course Great Decisions 2018 by Ambassador Flatten. Barbara Evans will teach a course on historic and significant architecture in Northfield. She has taught such a course before. She intends to cover new buildings and more buildings now. Walt Stromseth, a retired philosophy professor from St. Olaf, is doing a course entitled The Ethical Critique of Our Capitalist Society. Various people, most well known, Karl Marx, gave an ethical critique of capitalism. More recently, a prominent French thinker, Thomas Piketty, has argued that capitalism, just left unrestrained, becomes anti-democratic. And Walt wants to look at those two critiques and ask whether there's anything to them, and if there is, what. Emily Ernest, to get to course number 10, is offering a very different kind of course, an introduction to the writer's workshop model. And if you know as little as I know about that, you wonder what on earth the writer's workshop model is. It's a model for critiquing and improving your writing. Endless critiques, edits, discussions of the students' writings. And for many of the people who have interesting things to say and have an urge to write, this is a good opportunity to learn how to improve your writing. So those 10 courses we hope all fill up. They're all very, very interesting. If you ask me, well, which one I'm going to take, the answer is I can't tell yet.
You haven't decided?
No.
We already touched on a couple, Gary, but what are some of the others in Faribault?
A retired educator here from the Faribault system, Cheryl Freund, is going to teach a course on revisiting Shakespeare, Caesar is Dead, which should be pretty fascinating. She's going to teach that for 8 weeks, and she's going to have her class down at the Historical Society here in Faribault. We mentioned I'm going to do this class on what is art, and we've also got the real CSI story with Troy Dunn and Andy Bowen, and then we're going to have a fourth class here offered by Jan Mitchell on environmental literacy. And she is a very fascinating woman here from our local area.
One correction to that. Cheryl Freund's course is entitled Revisiting Shakespeare, Caesar is Not Dead.
Oh, is not dead. Yes, that's a good point.
that the Shakespearean plays are alive for us, and we have things to learn from them.
Again, Gordy, these courses offered can be examined a little bit further in detail if you go to our Cannon Valley website.
cvec.org.
Right.
I did have a text from a listener who wants to know, and I didn't notice on your website. Can you pay for this on the website?
That's a good question.
We assume you can, otherwise you couldn't register. We've always asked people to put their money on the line so that the persons handling the registration know that they're for real and they really mean it. So Gary and I don't know this from experience, but it's our assumption that you can.
Okay, all right. Well, I would assume that too. But
If nothing else, you can go to the website and run off a printout of the registration form and turn it into a senior center, either at Northfield or Faribault, or just put it in the mail with your check, and you will be registered for the course.
So I can pay for it at the Faribault or Northfield Senior Centers 2 years saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And if the class is not filled up and your registration is accepted, then the check is cashed by the Elder Collegium. Otherwise, it's returned, of course.
I'm glad you brought that up because formal registration period ends March 5th.
The formal registration period ends March 5th, but if there's still open places in a course, you may register into the second week of the course.
Okay.
The spring term begins, by the way, on Monday, March 26th, and runs until Friday, May 18th of
You
this
take
year.
the summer off?
Generally, yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
But not quite. The Elder Collegium and Carleton College jointly provide a film festival in the summers. Usually 4 films are shown at the cinema in the White's Center at Carleton. And then the next morning there is an Elder Collegium class for folks who want to discuss those films.
Are these
in some
locally
seriousness.
produced films?
No, these are regular production films,
okay.
Commercial films. And the films have not yet been announced for this coming summer.
So they may be classics.
They may be classics.
Like Grapes of Wrath.
Or it may be the latest thing from Hollywood.
I only have a couple minutes left of the show, but I have got to pick your brains about what recently was in the news. Duluth schools taking To Kill a Mockingbird and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn off their library bookshelves.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to get your take on it. You're an educator, Gary.
I don't agree with that policy. I think that we need to have an open evaluation of those books by all, and it gives us a better, well-rounded education if we do that.
I agree entirely with Gary. It's those books are difficult to read now, but there are things about us and our past that are difficult to face, and we need to face them. We don't have to approve of them. We need to recognize them for what they are.
Well, and remember the time they were written in.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, case in point, what kid didn't read at our age? We were required to read it in school.
Oh,
Yes.
The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, and that was a terrific adventure through the Mississippi River,
It was a great message.
Exactly.
and a lot of good
Yes.
messages within.
Fantastic message. Same with To Kill a Mockingbird, maybe one of my favorite books of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And a great movie,
It was a great movie,
indeed.
but the movie never matches the book.
Not
think?
quite. Not quite.
They did a great job capturing the book. Don't
I
get
think
me
so.
wrong.
Yes.
But I don't know. The book always seems better to me.
Yeah, I would agree that your imagination runs wild as you picture these scenes in the book as you're reading it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
having
very much
us.
for having us.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Sign up, folks. cbec.org. Pretty simple to remember. cbec.org. That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota on KDHL AM Faribault, Minnesota. Have a great day, everybody.